Football League as to what they were going to do with one of their biggest stars and how they were going to handle it. This was a violation of competitive rules. Now, what Tom's place was, I don't know. The next chapter will be what Tom Brady says. But right now, this is the only thing the league could do. I'm sure Tom will appeal it. I'm sure New England will appeal it. But the league had to come down this hard, basically because of the incidents that have occurred. You're right about collateral damage. This is just horrible timing for everybody that loves the New England Patriots and the Patriots and Tom.
Joe, how often do quarterbacks doctor the footballs, or, I look, in baseball, we know there isn't a baseball thrown in a game that hasn't been spit on or rubbed up with dirt or, had its finish altered or in some cases scraped accidentally across a belt buckle, things like that. But how often does the football that you would receive first snap of the game, how often in your experience was it the football that you totally unaltered?
Well, I never knew. I never altered it because, remember, when I played, Jeff, whether it was the CFL or the NFL, we used one football.
Okay.
You have a kicking ball.
Right.
See, you have a kicking ball and a passing ball, and the passing balls get rubbed down. But here's my problem with all this. First of all, you got 32 quarterbacks in the National Football League that are starters. Everybody likes the ball at a different deflation. And the league recognizes that there's a variance between 12-5 and 13-5. I think that one of the questions that has to be asked, and I don't know if it's answered in the Wells report because I'm not going to read 243 pages, is you examined 12 footballs. Were every one of those footballs deflated or inflated to a specific amount, and was it exactly the same amount? That's a question that needs to be answered in my mind, because we know that Aaron Rodgers likes his inflated to the upper end at 13.5. If you also read the Wells report, one of the excerpts that was taken from it, you hear these two guys talking about the fact that two of the balls was inflated to 16. So you have these variances. I think that the fact that Tom Brady will not give them his Texas, I think that there is an assumption of guilt as opposed to an assumption of innocence in this situation. But when you read the report, it basically says they think he generally...
As I said to you guys about an hour ago, according to Twitter, according to Billboard's Twitter account, it's just in Kanye West is reporting at this year's Billboard Music Awards this Sunday. As I said to you guys, 5 days removed, 5 days away for this Sunday's Billboard Music Awards. Kanye West has been added to this Sunday's Billboard Music Awards. Man, that is gonna be epic. Because the thing about Kanye West, and it's just a little teaser, most people knock Kanye West as artists, oh, he's douche and all that, but say what you will about the artist Kanye West, he's a very talented artist, and I'm not knocking him as a person, as an artist and all that. It's, to quote him, he's a genius. He's a very talented artist.
Have known, there was a probability that he might have known, but this is the problem that exists. Perception is reality. In the court of public opinion, Tom Brady is a cheater, and that will tarnish his legacy going forward. It tarnishes the New England Patriots championship going forward, even though the fact of the matter is that game it wasn't a factor at all, because in the second half of that game, New England scored more points with quote-unquote a properly inflated football than they did in the first half with a properly underinflated football. So, I just, it's public opinion, especially in this day of social media, and especially as much as the fact that New England Patriots are hated because they're really great.
Right. See, I got this idea too, and I may be way off base here, Joe, but I think that a quarterback should be, unless it's egregious. I mean, unless we're talking about, deflating the football by 50% or whatever. I think a quarterback should be able to alter the football to make it comfortable for him. Because
Jeff, I agree with you. The rule is in place. They give you a variance to 12.5 to 13.5. Now, like I'm saying, well, how underflated, using with a term, or what was the PSI for the balls that were examined? Were they all exactly the same? I think that's very important in Tom's defense. Okay, and this is what's going to happen. This is what I believe will happen. Tom Brady was vehement when Chris Collinsworth asked him in the production meeting before the Super Bowl, did you do anything to the footballs? Tom said absolutely not. When Tom stood up in his press conference, he said he didn't do anything wrong. He's a 3-time world champion. He's one of the 2 most famous faces in football. He and Peyton Manning are the 2 faces of professional football. He loves the game of football. He respects the game of football. I believe all this. I would be totally blown away if he came out and said, hey, look, I lied. I think he will come out and be steadfast in the belief that he didn't do anything wrong. Now, one of those guys, McNally, who called himself, I think, the deflator, he could have called himself the inflator. Or he could have called himself NyQuil. Or he could have called himself something. It didn't matter. But you start adding up all these things and public opinion basically says Tom's guilty.
Does this, and you're right, this shows Tom Brady to the public eye to be a cheat. I mean, there's no other way around it.
Yeah, there is no other way around it.
But in the football world, to football people, does this take away anything from what he has done as a quarterback and as a leader for the New England Patriots?
No, not at all. Not at all. Not in my opinion. Not one bit. Now, here's the other problem, Jeff, that comes up. Is the National Football League has a flawed system. Okay? The fact that you allow the officials to examine footballs and then you give them back to the teams is a flawed system. Nobody, I mean, if protocol was proper, this would have never occurred. But sometimes it takes something like this to, force the league to be able to change policy, which they're going to have to do. They're going to have to change policy. Now, those footballs will be under lock and key until such time the game is started. And that's a good thing. So the situation won't come up again. But, has anybody ever overinflated a football? I mean, these are the questions that I start asking as a quarterback. When this whole thing happened the week before the Super Bowl, I went to Redskins Park, our practice facility. Right. And I asked them to deflate a football for me down to 11.5 PSI. It is negligible, the difference in the football. People will say, well, it's easier for a running back to carry, it's easier for a receiver. No, it's negligible at best. So, now you had this giant investigation, and you have this tremendous black eye for, I think, and what suffers is the National Football League suffers, Tom suffers, the Pats suffer. Mr. Kraft's one of the most classy people in the world. His organization now is looked upon differently.
In conversation with Joe Theismann on the Jeff Blair Show, Robert Kraft is also has been a big supporter of Roger Goodell. I mean, there's that famous GQ article in which he's referred to as the assistant commissioner by somebody inside the NFL office. How damaged is their relationship right now, and what does that do to Roger Goodell, to the protection that he needs in his job?
I don't think it does anything. I think he did his job. Remember, there was a competitive element that was violated.
That's true.
There was a violation.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so you can't get around the fact that according to the Wells report, and I keep referencing it, there was a violation. Who's responsible? I still don't think it's answered. That's going to be answered, I think, when Tom Brady ultimately speaks up, and he has to. And by the way, that fiasco with Jim Gray should have never taken place. If I was Tom Brady's agent, I would have said, go do the event, do not make any public comment, because it's Massachusetts. It looked like it was and he was right, it looked like a New England pep rally at a very bad time for everybody, especially with the report coming out. And having him have to say, well, you know, I haven't seen it, you know, I wasn't necessarily that good in school, football's, I mean, whoever his advisors were did a terrible job allowing him to be able to do that in public before anything came out. That didn't help his cause at all. But as far as Mr. Kraft goes, Mr. Kraft is one of the 32 owners in the National Football League that supported Roger. I think the league did exactly what it had to do. It levied a penalty that had to be strong enough to send the message. It will be appealed, probably reduced to 2 games. But that's the process. But it's got to go through the process. And I think Mr. Kraft totally will back the process. Won't agree with it, doesn't like it, but it's the process that's in place.
Joe, as always, it was great to talk to you. You be well.
Thanks, buddy. Take care. So, hello to all my friends in Toronto. I miss you.
Take care. That's Joe Theismann.
Thanks, Joe.
The great Joe Theismann. Norm?